The first thing I think I try to do is just show how much power could be created if we just listen to each other.
What's up, Griot family? It's your girl, Natasha S. Alford, and I have the honor and pleasure of interviewing a friend, but also like an inspiration in this writing thing, D. Watkins. What's up, D? Good to see you.
I'm happy to be here, and I have the honor of getting interviewed by your inspiration. So thank you.
Yo, it is just amazing to see your journey over the years. Like, there's this really great quote by Issa Rae about, a lot of people, they network up and they just think of people who've like, been their icons for the longest time, but seeing your peers like really grow and achieve new things is like a special kind of thing. And that's how I feel looking at you, like just watching each step of your career. It's been incredible. How do you feel about where you are at as an award-winning author and now also writing television?
I try my best to not reflect or really pay attention to what's happening. I just try to, when I'm lucky enough to get a job, I lock in on the job, tunnel vision, and I try my best to get to the finish line. I think sometimes, and I'm not. This isn't my personality type, but I've seen this where people hang on to a project and the project's done, like it's gone. So like, yes, I love the work that I've created last year and the year before and the year before and all the way back to whenever, but I try to put it out into the world and then I just disconnect from it because it's not mine anymore.
Yeah, there's something about giving it up to the world. You're like, for better or worse, however people respond, I've done my duty, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you have a nice piece of artwork behind you. And if you had the artist over for like, a cup of coffee or something, they can't run to your stand and it's yours. So they can't go in there and start twisting around the metal and trying to make it into what they, because they see something else. It's kind of gone. So I just try to let it go.
Mm. So it's interesting. Black Boy Smile, your new book. When I look at the cover, I think art, right? I'm like, this is like one of my favorite covers ever.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talk about the inspiration for this project. What brought you to this place where you were like, this is what I need to give the world?
I was undergoing a personal transformation emotionally, and I was as a man who was at the time um, in my mid to late 30s. I was finally understanding emotional intelligence and how to not act like a child because of things that happened to me when I actually was a child. You know, I get into an argument with a person that I love, and instead of me addressing the problem, I would just shut down and be like, you know what, whatever, and act like it didn't exist when actually there was like these deep underlying issues, and those issues they lead to stress. They prohibit you from dealing with trauma. They force you to actually damage really, really good relationships. So I'm undergoing this transformation and I'm saying, wow, people, when they meet me, or when they know a little bit of my backstory, they're like, oh yeah, East Baltimore guy, street guy, whatever, whatever. And you're bulletproof. And I'm like, nah, I'm not. Not just not bulletproof because I've been shot before and it didn't bounce off. But outside of that, like, I feel sad. I get depressed. You know, for years I forced myself to not cry, but I deserve to cry. I deserve to process these emotions and again not act like a child when things don't go my way. So I wanted to just show the world that we do have feelings. We are capable of being vulnerable, and it's not a weak thing; it's a strong thing. And I wanted to put that out there, and I figured the best way for me to do it would be to lock in on the moments that kind of define my original ideas of masculinity and then kind of pick them apart as I go through the book.
Yeah, the book is fascinating the way that it's structured because you do get these snapshots of different phases in your journey. And one of my favorite quotes from the book, you write, "We weren't men and didn't really want to be men. We wanted to be kids, but always had to act like men, whatever that meant. It was all a lie." Who do you think created the lie? And like, why has the lie persisted for so long, particularly, with Black men?
I think so a number of things. One, beginning of time, right? Dominate, conquer, destroy, win, 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 win. But when you add race to it, and you think about our entrance into this country, um, we didn't have any power, any control. And when, certain things in history happened that allowed Black people to actually exercise some form of freedom, we still had no power in society except what happens in a household. So whatever the rules of patriarchy are, you know, we inherited from the dominant culture and then doubled down on our own families. And we just rode that wave ever since. And, and you see it, and it's crazy because the argument is, it kind of stretches beyond men. People who are oppressed a lot of times don't want to delete that oppression. They want to be oppressors. They think that if you're against me, and liberation means I have to make you feel the same way, when liberation should be nobody should have to feel this way. Nobody should feel slighted. Nobody should feel bad. Nobody should feel like they can't be them true selves. But we're in this space where liberation means, I want my lick back. And it's not a way to heal. So, the lie's been going on for a real long time. And we kind of inherited it, but at the same time, we can undo it in our own communities. I don't know the greater world. I'm just talking about how we interact with us.
For sure. And when I hear you say undo it, I hear you also talk about this desire to have power somewhere, to have dominance somewhere. When people sort of take your power, I think about the relationships between Black men and women, right? Which you also explore in this book. Talk about how you unpack that. And then we got to talk about what happens in the first chapter, which is, the abuse of power from older women to younger boys that we don't talk about enough in the community. But let's just start generally, and then we'll back into that. How do you address relationships between Black men and women in this book?
The first thing I think I try to do is just show how much power could be created if we just listen to each other. We just have to listen to each other. A lot of times we react because, especially in relationships, we think that the person who we're with is a mind reader. And they know exactly how we're supposed to feel and think and move and deal in every situation. And you are close to the person you spend your life, but you guys are close. And maybe sometimes you guys can finish each other's sentences or jokes or whatever, and that's all fine and good. But it doesn't mean you're supposed to know when I feel slighted. I have to step up and say it. Doesn't mean I'm gonna know everything you're going through unless you tell me. And that's the main thing. So it's how do we start to listen to each other, and how do we abandon this idea of putting expectations on people that are impossible, because it just ruins good relationships and good people.
So this is a spoiler alert for anybody who has not read Black Boy Smile and you want to read it. This is something that happens earlier in the book, so feel free to forward. But we can talk about this moment. You go to summer camp and you are reluctant to go from the beginning. You don't even want to be there, right?
It was in my energy.
something within you were like, nah, this is I'm not interested in going. And of course, we're parents now, this is what's best for you. You got to go. Your mom wanted you to go. And during this summer camp experience, I'm blown away by a lot of the trauma you endure. Like, as a kid at a place where you're supposed to be having fun, there's abuse, there's bullying, there's fights that take place. But then there's also this moment where you encounter an abuser, someone who sexually assaults, molests you. Why were you ready now to tell that story? And what do you want the community to sort of talk about coming from, this experience that you share? I know a lot of artists, they don't want to tell people what to think, but I imagine for you to share it with the world, there was some sort of intention behind that. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily talking to women when I wrote that. So there's been a lot of conversations around that section. And I wasn't necessarily talking to women, and I wasn't necessarily talking to abusers. I was talking to men who have these stories and they hold them tight. And we are trained to cherish them. We are trained to hold them up like trophies. We are trained to, to go through things like this and wear it as a badge of honor, cool points, oh, he gets the girls, or he has the girls, or he was, I remember I had a friend who was literally, he was 12 years old, but he was big. He was the biggest 12-year-old you ever saw. And there was a woman who owned a corner store, and they openly dated. This woman was like in her early 30s. And they openly dated, like they went places, they did things, and we thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And it wasn't until I was older and I was like, wow, he's a victim, but you know what? She's also a victim too. Something at some point happened to her, and nobody in the everybody in the neighborhood is out in the open seeing it. And maybe every once in a while an adult would shake their head, but never men. What is that? Where does it come from? How do we process it and move beyond?
What you're saying, Dee, about this being a badge of honor, when boys find themselves in situations where they are molested or assaulted or raped, we see it in the culture. How many interviews have we seen on, Vlad TV or some sort of hip hop show where it's like rappers are talking about being boys and this happening to them, and people either laugh at it, right, or sort of make light of it. I think that's hard for me as a mom to see. Has being a parent influenced the way that you reflect on what happened to you at that time?
Absolutely. Being a parent, it makes everything is scary. Everything is scary. Everything is like, I consider myself to be, I'm on a healing journey. At the same time, somebody looks at my daughter the wrong way, I'm ready to snap. And I have to work on that too. And the beauty of being a parent is, these kids will teach you. They'll teach you how to react in certain situations. They'll show you. I was dropping her off at Early Learning like a week ago, and the little boy started screaming her name. He was so happy that she was there, and she was having one of them mornings, but she didn't feel like it. So as soon as I walk her up to the gate, she's like, no, right? And he's like, cross. And he runs to her, and she just says no, and she stiffs on him. And then she walks over to the teacher and gives that teacher a hug. And the boy's just sitting there, and I'm like, she has it. Like she knows what's up. So maybe I can, she knows her boundaries. Yeah. And maybe I can learn, I can be better with mine, but it makes everything more scary. And it just makes me I just want to be the person I always needed. I love my mom, I love my dad dearly, but I also think I'm responsible for taking everything to the next level and trying to be a better parent based on the tools they gave me.
There are many different points in this book where, as you say, there are expressions like natural human emotions that you face that you felt that you had to suppress, that you couldn't share with the world because there were certain expectations about what it meant to be a Black boy. So what do we need to know about raising and nurturing healthy, happy Black boys?
I think we need to know that the same kind of love that we give or that we need to give to our sisters has to also be, given to young men as well. Like we need to get to a space where one gender isn't being pitted against another gender, and where we're just like figuring out how to create realities that are where everyone can win, where everyone can experience peace. A slighted or damaged man is gonna, he's gonna damage another woman and another man, over and over again. And we get to this, well, all black men are this, all black women are that. We just, at some point, we have to get away from that. And I get it. Like, I get it. I get the arguments. I get the conversations. I get where it comes from. But how do we get to a place of showing love? I know throughout the bulk of my life, I'm expected to go out into the world and be productive and provide and make things happen. But I also know that most of the people who die at the hands of police or just in the streets in general look like me. However, I have the same responsibility as another person, who looks nothing like me. So acknowledging that should be like, okay, bet, well, we're going to give this lived experience some love instead of, and I hate to do this, but the only time we have these conversations is, to me, and I'm talking like on the internet, is when there's a black person who's like killed, who's like murdered, in like a very graphic way. Then the outpour and the love comes out. But it's like, let's not wait for Michael Brown. Let's not wait for Sandra Bland. Let's honor them by all of us constantly loving on each other and giving love to each other in a constant way. Why is that so difficult? Yes, there's some very, very toxic, damaged men in the world. And guess what? There's some toxic and damaged women too. And let's love them. Let's forgive them. Let's love them. The lady who did what she did to me, I don't know what she is, but I forgive her. I don't hate her. I don't pull my eyelashes out no more. I don't hate her. You know what I'm saying? But I have a reason I can climb on this little narrative based on one bad experience and ride it till the wheels fall off. But I didn't want to do that. I had a line in the book that says I had to understand she was a victim too, and my editor took it out because of her own, maybe her own beliefs, or maybe she feels like, maybe she was like, she's a mom too. She probably was like, forget that. And I didn't want to have that fight with her, because when you're working on these books, it's a dance, and sometimes you're gonna bust a move, and sometimes your editor's gonna bust a move. And this was a move she wanted to bust, but I stand on that. I don't hate that person. Something bad happened to her. She spread it to me. That bad thing happened to me, and even though I never abused a person in that way, I had all types of toxic language and energy and relationships that was a result of that. And I had to look at myself and say, okay, you have to be better so that you're not doing that to another person. What does that look like? Let's start here. And it's never too late.
It's never too late. Dee, I have to ask you one more thing before we start to wrap. And it's just about what's happening in the world right now. If anyone has read any of your books, they know that violence is not a new thing. Gun violence in particular, that's not a new thing. You have many stories and experiences where you talk about being exposed to guns, seeing gun violence at a very young age. But in America, we go through these cycles where, we all are talking about it again, and then we stop, and then we talk about it again. But for Black boys and men in particular, you are more often victims of gun violence. And I wonder what you think needs to change in the public dialogue to actually create some sort of positive change around this.
Unpopular opinion, Natasha, unpopular opinion.
Give me the unpopular, give me the truth.
We need to abolish guns. We need to abolish guns. This country has proved that it's irresponsible. This country people are not responsible enough to have firearms. I mean, nothing good comes from it. I don't care about your hunting. I don't care about your heritage. I don't care about your Second Amendment. What I do care about is babies are dying because of guns. We have these tragedies and the nation mourns, then the news cycle changes, and we start talking about something else. But at the same time, those families are stuck in them positions, when the cameras go off. And I don't know a person. I'm from Baltimore City. I don't know a person who hasn't been affected by gun violence in a negative way. I don't, and I know a lot of people like, and I can't. I've never met a person in this town who can't say my cousin got killed, my cousin got shot, my uncle, my mother, my grandmother, my nephew, my sister's baby. Like everybody has a story, multiple stories about how guns ruined their family. So at this point, I think we just need to do away with them. Figure out another way to hunt, get a bow and arrow or something. But we need to get rid of guns.
I have to say thank you for this book. Thank you. I know that you said that you've had many years to think about these stories, but they're so visceral and real. A lot of people will read this book and feel like you're talking about things that they've experienced as well. And it's a gift, and I hope opens up more conversations that need to be had. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, D. Watkins, thanks so much for tuning into the Grill fam. Thank you so much for tuning into this conversation. Please pick up a copy of Black Boy Smile, as well as many other books that D. Watkins has written. What else you got going on so we can send the people? Hey, there you go. Beautiful.
I'm working on another television show in early development, and we're just fighting to try to have it filmed in Baltimore. So we'll be dealing with a lot of issues that I talk about in this book, becoming what it takes to become a good person. So please stay tuned for that.